We're getting closer and closer to the invasion of France as the Allies set out to liberate Western Europe and destroy the Third Reich. Preparations are in full swing in Great Britain, but something we haven't covered is whether the Germans know much about what is going on. Well, they certainly know that an invasion is coming, and they even know the code name. Will it change the course of the war? This is Spies and Ties, a series of World War II. I'm Astrid Deinhard. And hello, darlings. Last month, General Alfred Jodl, chief of the Operations Staff of the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, that's German Armed Forces High Command, summarized some recent intelligence in his diary. They got most valuable information about what was going on, and that is due to a guy that considers himself the best spy that ever walked the earth. That's what he thought to himself when he made the decision to actually become one. Jodl wrote simply, results from Cicero and Overlord, major invasion from Britain. So, imagine a guy with enormously contradicting ambitions, talents and characteristics, and with a huge ego. And now imagine this, Ankara, 1944, this guy is walking in socks over his somewhat shabby carpet in his somewhat shabby little ballet room in the British Embassy. Outside, the weather is getting warmer, spring is coming. Under his carpet, he's hiding £300,000 sterling, and that is 4.6 million Reichsmark. Growing up, he was an aggressive, daring young man, the black sheep of an honorable, better-to-do Turkish family. He was sent to military school, but being a punk, opposed to everything and everyone, he was kindly asked to leave. His only real ambition was cars and speeding, faster than was good for him. One day, he stole a motorbike from a French officer, shredded it and himself to pieces. Went to jail, but soon escaped, got caught again, and back to another jail, this time in Marseille. There, he learns fluent French, and that was very convenient for his later career. Even more convenient, he takes singing lessons by a German professor when he starts his first job. Enough of the past. What does Cicero know about Overlord? And how does he get the information, a spy who works right under the nose of the British? And what does this mean for the war? Cicero's real identity is Elissa Bazna, an Albanian-born Turkish valet who works in Ankara for the British ambassador to Turkey, Sir U. Necbul Yugusin. We came across those names back in June last year when we took a little summer holiday to Turkey. We reported from glittering Istanbul with its networks of spies and smugglers stretching across Europe and the Middle East, and visited the capital Ankara, where German Ambassador Franz von Papen had just survived a pretty amateurish Soviet assassination attempt, right? I'll link that video down below later. When we left the story, when Bazna was just getting ready to apply to the job with Sir U, what do you know? He gets the job and starts working at the British Embassy sometime in late summer or early autumn. So, listen up. Sir Yu really likes him. The two men both are big music lovers. You remember, the singing lessons with the German professor. Sir Yu plays the piano, and Bazna has a great voice. So, the two love practicing together from time to time, and Bazna dressed in his custom blue uniform with a fez and a scimitar. So Bazna gets almost unrestricted access throughout Sir Yu's residence. And to his classified documents because Sir Hugh breaks Foreign Office rules and brings his papers home to the residence to work on them in the evening. That was highly forbidden. This is quite surprising because Basna is not the first spy on the embassy staff. He replaced a man named Andrea Markovic, who was fired in May 1943 for supplying the German embassy with information on the ambassador's movements. But Sir Hugh has a somewhat very relaxed, gentlemanly attitude to spying. When Air Chief Marshal Sholto Douglas visited Ankara, Sir Hugh admitted that many of our servants seemed to be spies. But he said that he didn't want to dismiss them because they were so good workers. And anyway, their replacements would also probably be spies. Well, now Sir Hugh's nonchalance has come back to bite him. Basna quickly scouted out the residency, noting the layout of the building and evaluating the other staff, right? Then one day, while Sir Hugh was in the bath, Basna makes a copy of his key. He begins accessing Sir Hugh's briefcases and his document safe. Then, using his camera, he takes photographs of the documents inside. This sort of behavior isn't out of the ordinary for Basna. Late 1942 until early 1943, he worked for a German diplomat named Albert Jenke. As Basna describes it after the war, I did not shrink from poking my nose into my employees' correspondence. Both private and official. Eventually, Jenke figured out what was going on and fired Basna. Back then, Basna wasn't motivated by anything more than the thrill of snooping around and impressing his mistress with his exploits. He kept the photos hidden away and made no attempt to sell them to the Allies, to the Turkish intelligence, or to a newspaper. But this time around, what does he want? He wants cash. And he knows someone who might be willing to pay. And around this time, he decides to become the best spy ever. On October 26, he goes back to visit Jenke and his wife, Frau Jenke, at the German embassy. I imagine things were a bit awkward at first, because he got fired, but the Germans are sold when Basna tells them that he already has 2 rolls of films with over 50 photos of classified documents ready to be developed. And what does he ask? He asks for £20,000 each for these and £50,000 for all subsequent rolls. So, the Yankees introduced Basna to an Austrian named Ludwig Karl Moitzig. Moitzig is a Sicherheitsdienst agent working undercover as an attaché at the German embassy. He discusses the situation with von Papen in Ankara, and in Berlin, the matter goes to head of the SD Walter Schellenberg and Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop. On October 30th, Moitzig gets the green light to employ Basna as an agent. Their first exchange takes place at 10 that night. They slip up to Moitzig's office, and Basna supplies his first 2 rolls of film. Moitzig hands over a bag stuffed with pound notes. Moitzig stays up all night developing the 52 photographs of British documents and reports. In the morning, heads to Papen's office. Papen is impressed. From his knowledge of British policy and style, he concludes that they are genuine. Papen will later write in his memoirs that form, content, and phraseology left no doubt that this was the genuine article. I realized that we had come upon a priceless source of information. Papen gives Basna his famous code name, Cicero, And for the next 6 months, Cicero follows a very regular routine, and that means Sir Hugh's schedule runs like clockwork, and Basna has lots of opportunities to get a peek at his documents. Everything. Sometimes he strikes during Sir Hugh's long bath that he takes each morning and evening, and sometimes when the ambassador is eating his meals or playing the piano, or he simply waits until his boss is asleep. He either photographs the documents in place or takes the photos in his own room in the embassy. Finally, he returns the documents to Sir Hugh's briefcase or safe, and the ambassador takes them back to the embassy, none the wiser. After that comes the exchange. Mojzsis buys a deliberately unremarkable Opel, and the two men cruise through the nighttime streets of Ankara, swapping photos for bundles of cash. During these late-night drives, Mojzsis tries to figure out what motivates his new agent. Why does he do it? Basna tells a tall story about his father having been shot and killed by a British soldier. He also claims that he has a fondness for Germany and wants to help keep Turkey neutral. Again, those are downright lies. We know that Basna was equally willing to sell his material to the Soviet Union if the Germans had refused his offer. Basna's motivation are far simpler. Cold, hard cash. The valet has delusions of grandeur and wants the wealth and status that goes with being a spy. He admits this before, during and after his spying career. As Mojzsis reports, I think he's an adventurer. He's vain, ambitious, and sufficiently intelligent to have raised himself out of the class into which he was born. He doesn't belong to that class anymore. But then he doesn't belong to the class above either, which he both loathes and admires. Basna is a mercenary through and through, but he's quite an effective one. His spying career takes off at a pretty crucial time. In November, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill redoubles his efforts to entice Turkey into the war on the Allied side. Of course, the problem is that the Turks are demanding a huge amount of military material to make it worth their while, more than the British can afford. Throughout December 43 and into 44, Basna's documents keep the Germans updated on negotiations that become increasingly bad-tempered. Papen hardly needs to do anything to scupper the talks, although he does at one point threaten to bombard Istanbul if the Turks join the Allies. By February 44, the Turks have firmly rejected the British proposals. And what about Overlord? Well, it first comes up in Cicero's photograph of a Foreign Office telegram on December 21st. This telegram didn't say much about Overlord itself, rather focused on the need for Britain to maintain a threat to the Germans from the Eastern Mediterranean until Overlord is launched. When Papen reads this on January 6, he correctly deduced that Overlord is the code name for a major action to be launched from Britain. We don't know if this is the first time the Germans come across the code name. After the war, Mojzsis and his boss at the SD, Walter Schellenberg, will boast that they were the ones to discover the secret via Cicero. But because of the disjoint nature of German intelligence and the lack of records, we just can't know for certain. The truth is, it doesn't matter much at all. The Germans really don't learn anything useful. Learning the code name for the invasion of Europe is not groundbreaking in itself. pretty much everyone across the world knows the Allies will be invading Europe sometime in 44. I mean, the Germans have been building the Atlantic Wall since 42, precisely to guard against this. But the Germans will never pin down the vital details of the invasion, like the date, the target, or the order of battle, despite anything that comes in from Cicero or any other source. Their job is made even harder because by this point Overlord is more of an umbrella name for the invasion of Europe as a whole. The individual components all have their own designations, like the actual landings on the beaches of Normandy, which are codenamed Neptune. That's not to mention that the Allies are running a deception strategy codenamed Bodyguard. Indy's spoken about this in his series, so I won't step on his toes. But key to Bodyguard are the two component operations called Fortitude North and Fortitude South. These deception operations are supported by the formation of fake Allied armies. The first army group under General George Patton in southern England and the 4th British Army up in Scotland. These fake armies are supported by fake orders, fake radio messages, and even dummy tanks and other vehicles. These operations aim to convince the Germans that an invasion is coming in the Pas de Calais and Norway respectively. So, on top of this is some work from our old friends from the Double Cross Committee. Remember them from Operation Minced Meat and the Dead Marine in Spain? Well, they control a network of double agents in the UK and abroad. And these agents are sending back all sorts of information to their handlers in Berlin. A lot of it is contradictory, but it's like radar jamming. You send out a whole load of signals and hope that it confuses the enemy as to the true picture. It's not just obstacles raised by the Allied side either. The Germans are pretty poor in the analysis of Cicero's material. Papen and Moitzig are convinced of Cicero's authenticity. But back in Berlin, Ribbentrop and Schellenberg think that the whole thing might be a British deception. Schellenberg has so much respect for MI6 that he can't believe that a British diplomat would just leave important papers lying around in his bedroom. Up until now, they've poured cold water on a lot of what Cicero has found. That's not to mention that Schellenberg and the SD are distracted by their battles against Admiral Canaris and his military intelligence service, the Abwehr, right? That's before we get into the debates in the German leadership. Hitler is convinced that the Allies will launch an attack in the Balkans. His intelligence officers and generals doubt that there is much chance of this, especially after the breakdown in Anglo-Turkish relationships. Still, Hitler clings to this view, and an Allied deception plan, codenamed Zeppelin, reinforces the possibility of a threat in the Balkans. By now, April 44, Cicero is coming to the end of his life as a spy. You might be expecting that he gets caught by the British, or that he gets too greedy and the Germans decide to liquidate him. Well, my dears, the truth is nowhere near as dramatic. The British are starting to close in on Bosnia. This is thanks to two spies working for the American OSS. One is a German diplomat in Switzerland named Fritz Kolbe, and the other is a secretary at German embassy in Ankara named Cornelia Krapp. Very interesting character. There's a lot to say about her. Both have supplied information pointing to a leak at the British embassy. The Brits have sent a team to the embassy to investigate and have installed an alarm system on the document safe. They haven't identified Bosna, but things are getting a bit too hot for him. By now, he's earned almost £300,000. That's about $1.2 million in return for about 400 photographs worth of documents. He's made his cash. And because he has no ideological attachment to Germany, of course, he doesn't feel the need to continue spying. Later this month, he will resign his post. He will lie low in Ankara for a while before going on a spending spree. But alas, poor Cicero has been betrayed. It will turn out that almost all of the money he has been paid are forged banknotes made by slave laborers in Sachsenhausen concentration camp. What a karma, huh? From this whole extraordinary affair, the Germans have learned very little of use. But Bosna has learned one fundamental truth: never work for the Nazis. They tend not to keep their word. There's even a very interesting book, Never Make Business with Hitler. For more on another famous set of spies working right under the nose of the British, click here for my video on the Cambridge 5. To get even more content like this, join the Time Ghost Army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. And I will see you next time, darlings.